All righty, fantastic. If you're in the room here, we're going to jump on in. If you're watching online, look forward to you being able to join us that way as well. Excellent. Go through a few things here together. That'll be good. Excellent. Yeah, why don't you come on up? We'll tag team here, the opening a little bit. Very good. Again, yeah, just for online. So I am Bill, the pastor here, and to my left is...
I'll just talk like this. Hi, I'm Mikey. I am here part of your leadership team and currently the chair.
Oh my God, can we get that on the mic now?
There you go.
Yeah, very good. So, once again, for people online.
My name is Mikey Trexel, and I serve on the leadership team, and currently I am the leadership chair, so I help kind of organize meetings and facilitate them.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mikey. That'll be great. All right, we've got a little bit of an agenda that we have up there. We'll have a chance to walk this through a little bit. Mikey and I will share some of this. We'll have a few other folks from leadership team jump on in. If at any point you kind of just have a question, want to raise your hand, you can totally do that, and we'll leave time for questions at the end as well. We're going to try and get questions on the mic here in our space. We don't always do that from a Sunday morning standpoint, but for this meeting, we thought that would be important to do. So we're going to try and do that, and if we miss something, we'll just repeat it. So that'll be fine as well. All right, let's actually begin with a call to order, if you will.
I am officially... Feels like a big job. I'm calling our meeting to order. And we're kind of this is going to be a recap. Over the last year, 6 months to a year, we've been hosting meetings with different groups to get input on kind of next steps for hope. And so a lot of the information that you're going to see is not necessarily new information, but if you were part of one small group, you heard just that small group information. So Pastor Bill and leadership members are going to try and kind of culminate and pull that all together in a cohesive manner.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, that says it pretty well. All right, I think the next slide. Very good. So let's talk about relaunch, because that's really where all this is going to go. If you've been at Hope if you've been at Hope actually for a while, you know our history, the opportunity to come together and join with the church that was here. At the time it was called Sanctuary. Before that it was Everett First Covenant. Yeah, we've had a really cool opportunity just to be able to do some fun work together. But for a variety of reasons, post-COVID in particular, now is an opportunity for us to start having a pretty bold conversation about what we think is next for us, and quite honestly, what is probably next for a lot of different churches. The American Christian church has been on a slow decline for quite some time. That slow decline got really quick over the last 2 to 3 years. And you're going to see, again, we've talked about this, you're going to see a lot of churches, quite honestly, close. Many churches already have. There are a number of churches that I continue to be quite surprised by, actually, that I'm in conversation with. I'm finding out that they're closing, they're merging, there's all kinds of things that are happening out there. And those things were going to happen slowly, but because of COVID and a few other things, they're now happening rather quickly. So that's why there's a little bit of urgency in getting this in front of all of you. It's stuff that I think we would have landed at this spot regardless, but we have landed here, and now we are, let's get moving on this for all those reasons.
Did you want to share a little bit about what other churches that are being successful, kind of how they had to change their model a little bit?
Yeah, we can do that. So in terms of what's working out there, there's a couple of different models that are working. One of those that has worked, and it honestly has worked very, very well in the last couple of years, is churches that have become essentially political churches. They grew out of COVID. They grew a little bit because of the political environment that we have going on in our world right now. Many of them actually grew by being defiant about COVID restrictions and rules and things like that, and then that has continued. That's just not who we are. That's not something we're going to model, but clearly that's out there. You see churches that continue to grow from really a presentational model. They're not necessarily trying to engage people. It allows you as a person just to be able to show up, see what is presented to you, take little pieces of it as you'd like, and then go back about your merry way. Many of those churches are doing really, really cool things. I know some of those churches. I've worshiped at some of those churches. That's also probably not a model that we necessarily want to model as well. We're looking for something that is more participatory. We're looking for something that is more in terms of engagement, us together, and then also within our community. We think that will be the model of many successful churches, quote-unquote successful churches, going forward, and in particular for churches that are a little bit smaller. Those other two models are generally larger churches, and large is fun. You can do some cool things. But for churches that aren't of that size, how are they going to continue to impact in their community? Well, I think it's going to be what we're going to talk about. So that's what we're doing. So yeah, in terms of that, again, just to name things, we have essentially a core. If you were to launch a church right now, you need a core. You talk about a core group of people. We have that right now, both with people that show up in person and then those that join us online. So we have that right now. That also means financially we're able to be stable right now. If we continue just to talk about this and don't actually move ahead on this, that core is going to dwindle. That financial stability is going to dwindle. So now's our chance to do this if we want. What does that church look like? Again, the language that we're using is center, connect, and impact. You're going to hear a lot more about that. It's not necessarily dramatically different when Janice was talking about connect groups. We've done small groups before. We're just really trying to lean into the language that we think really is the most important piece out of that. Impact the same, center the same. How is that unique? Well, it's, again, more relational and less presentational. We actually think we're going to try intentionally do this from a staffing standpoint as well, that it's going to be less, to name it, Sunday morning is often 85%, 90% of the church's focus. And we think that this style of church probably needs to be about 30, 30, 30. 33 and a third, it needs to be much more even from that standpoint. If all we're doing is focusing on Sunday morning, that's probably not a model that's going to be very effective for us. Again, that's that presentational model. We want to be something where people realize, no, we got to be connecting together. We got to be making an impact in our community. And so we got to do that. And then Jesus-centered, while willing to name how Jesus calls us to engage on issues of our day. That means bold steps, two of which we want you to hear about today. And again, this gets to why this is informational. We're at the point where we need to take some steps in order to get to a vote. We are not at that vote yet. The way that we run, the way our Constitution operates, we're going to talk about those things. We're going to get there where we will present something to you for a vote. But this isn't that. This is just saying, hey, we're going to do this. And we might take a vote at the end of this, but it would be a vote of confidence, a vote of you guys saying, yes, we heard you. Yeah, we got it, we're understanding, and yes, take those steps. None of this is legally binding. If and when we get to the point of legally selling the church, you, partners, have that vote. So that's when we would get to that point. But we don't have a bill of sale. We don't have the signs out front. Actually, one of the people we talked to asked that, can we put signs out in front of a church? I said, I don't know. That feels really weird. So, so anyway, we're not there yet, but we want to present to you that we're ready to take those steps in order to get there. So that's why this is presentational, informational, not a vote-oriented. But we may ask for that vote of confidence.
Well, and we wanted to make sure leadership team was real clear when we met that we want to give people an opportunity to process. It's really challenging when you hear information and then you're asked to make a decision immediately. So this is an opportunity for you to hear information, to be able to ask clarifying questions, and to be able to kind of let things sit with you, because you may get a couple days down the road and have some additional questions, and that's okay.
Yeah, ideally this gives us all lots of time in order to figure this out. So yeah, we've got two really key things that we want to get in front of you, and they probably bleed into other stuff as well, and we're happy to take questions on all that. We want to present these two things first. So Greg is going to share this first. Any questions on what we've just kind of laid out to begin with? No? All right, go for it.
All right, yeah. So I'm Greg, I'm on your leadership team, and kind of for this conversation too, just to let you know, I was a part of the building team that was formed years ago before the pandemic came. So just in regards to what we're talking about, this is a conversation that's been ongoing for a number of years and has gone through a lot of transitions with COVID and all that stuff. It's kind of changed the focus, but really within the last over a year, with a lot of the in-person and online meetings we've been having with the congregation about what our direction is, what our future is, what kind of church do we want to be. I think what came clear to the leadership team over those conversations was the idea that we needed to look at moving to a new area and looking at a different facility. So first kind of note today is just to let you know, as leadership team, we did have given approval. There's a couple folks, members that have agreed to drive this process of putting this facility and the property on the market for sale, to see what will happen with that. Again, as Bill mentioned, that doesn't mean sales imminent, or if there was an opportunity that was to come up to sell, that's a vote that would go to the congregation. So nothing imminently happening, and it's something it's not a decision the leadership team makes, that's a congregational decision. So, but as Bill mentioned, we're at a position where we need to kind of start looking into that sort of thing. So that's why we gave that approval. Let's move forward. Let's do this, start the process, and see what comes of that. And we've had the discussions. I think everybody kind of knows of the challenges that kind of brought us to this point. But if you haven't been in those conversations, just to kind of recap, this facility has served the congregation here for almost 50 years, which is outstanding. But that being said, it's a 50-year-old building. And that was kind of when we formed the building committee, was to take a look at what's the challenges and what are the options we have, because as a 50-year-old building, obviously things are going to start happening. Is that when we had our first discussions is are we going to do minor repairs? Do we need to do a major renovation? Up until, do we need to look at a different location? So that's one of the primary driving forces, was just the building itself, and knowing that there are things that are going to pop up, and looking at kind of how we want to impact our community. Some of the things that we had talked about around daycares or preschools or theaters, just to know that this building is not up to code with sprinklers. Anybody that's seen the lights kind of flicker off and on here in the sanctuary know the electrical is probably not up to code. There are a lot of factors there just in the building. The location here also came up recently, I think, in our discussions. We found out a lot about what the staff deals with at this location on a weekly basis that maybe just being here on Sundays we didn't really know about. As far as the transient population that kind of moves through our parking spaces in the woods behind us, and a lot of the safety factors that the staff faces here on almost a daily basis during the week really brought to attention not only their safety, but just as people are coming here, the congregation members that we have, any future members, and their concerns of, potentially wanting to start and become a member and bring their families here, and would there be, safety concerns just based on what we see regularly here. So, with that, the next question likely is, okay, what if we sell this facility and the property, what's next? And that's another thing we're starting ongoing now. I know Bill and some other members have had conversations about that and looking at, areas we could go and what potentially could be our next step. There are other churches that are in similar situations in Snohomish County, that's for sure. And I think as a leadership team, we've discussed, our preference if we were to sell this building and the property would be to find another church that we could potentially partner with. Very similar to what happened here with Sanctuary and Hope, to find a good fit for another group that may be struggling a little bit more than we are, to not only find a way to share a facility, but to help kind of some other congregations that may be in danger of not existing anymore. There may be lots of opportunities out there for different groups to come together and form a stronger church and have more of an impact on their community together than trying to struggle alone by themselves at this point. So there's nothing imminent in that. There are a number of groups that are out there and may be open to this, and we're certainly going to look to have those conversations with them to determine what may be a good route to go forward with. But that would be the preference, to find another church community that we could potentially partner with, rather than starting from scratch and finding land to buy and building a facility just because of the expense of that. Would be nicer if we could partner with somebody and be able to help renovate that facility if needed into what we need. And I think what we're looking for, what we heard from you guys was, wherever we go, whatever our future is in whatever place or facility, we need a place that helps us impact that community, that gives us a good fellowship area. Again, one of the challenges of this facility is the fellowship space is not very large. So as Bill was talking, the Sunday service for what we're looking at is probably just a portion of how we're wanting to reach folks. And the thing is, on Sundays, we don't want, once the service ends, for just everybody to leave, because there's no place to kind of connect and network and just hang out and have a cup of coffee and an open space for that. And that's throughout the week, having a facility that has the space to hopefully engage in whatever ways we see we're driven to, as far as youth programs and maybe youth theater or youth camps, church picnics, church barbecues. It would be nice to have a facility where we can do all that on our property. So that's what we're really looking forward to. Hopefully, we know that people would be great if we had an outdoor space that we could utilize. So that's going to be kind of what we're looking ahead to as we see opportunities, to see if it checks off those boxes that we've heard back from you guys are important in whatever direction we head. And again, there's nothing imminent. And that would be, if we were to find a potential partner like that, again, comes back to a congregational vote to move forward that. Much like, again, with Sanctuary and Hope, that was a process, months, if not over a year-long process of those two groups meeting and making sure it was going to work out for both groups before it came to a vote of the congregation to move forward on that. So that's the hope, and that's kind of, we just wanted to update you kind of where we stand now on those two items that we're going to move forward, and we'll see where that takes us.
Specifically on kind of that piece, are there questions that bubble up right away? You can ask later too. We're going to talk about kind of some more stuff. Yeah.
Just a comment from,
Oh, this from online, sure.
just make sure that you, you got it. No, I just want to make sure that questions were repeated, so what we've got.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
Oh, yes. There is a mic.
Good.
So they should be able to hear.
Got it. Yes, the point was to make sure we try and repeat questions out loud, so anybody online gets them. Good. Nothing from that so far? Cool. Yes.
Sorry, Margaret goes first. Sorry, Steve was asking if there's written information or recorded available to review. I'm not sure what he was looking for specifically, but maybe about building information or.
In terms of the, I guess if you could chime in with some more clarity, we'll try and answer that. Yeah.
Listing of building issues, anything that was discussed in the efforts of addressing these issues. We've put ourselves forward to work on church issues and have heard no responses.
Perfect. Yes. Thank you, Steve. Yes. We've had a number of people that have come in and helped out with various things. We've been super fortunate about that. In fact, just this last week, my favorite plumber has been here replacing 2 toilets that were completely broken, and we've done that. The no, no. In fact, yeah, we've made promises that there will be no urinals ever again. The challenge in terms of where we're at is that it is things like that. We can do some of those things. We've done as much of the surface stuff as we possibly can. We've done as much lighting as we can. We've done the bathrooms as we're able. We've done some carpet stuff. The building continues to make decisions for us about what we can and cannot do. In order to do sprinklers, ADA accessibility, really dramatically increase our square footage from a fellowship standpoint, we're talking about millions of dollars. We're not talking about someone who's able to help out and do a urinal, which is awesome. We need to continue to do that while we can. But we're talking about stuff that is major contract renovations, and we're unable to do that. So it is a fair question, and we continue to ask for help in the small things where we can do them, but it's the big stuff that we get stuck.
A quick question was, are we looking at both options of, if we join with other churches, sharing just the space and having separate congregations, or combining congregations?
Great question, and the short answer is yes. We're trying to be very, very open, not have a predetermined outcome. We're definitely going to merge. We're definitely going to just shared space. No, we're really trying to be open to what is out there. And I'll back that up by saying I'm finding that I'm having many more open, broad conversations than I would have been 5 years ago, because the church situation has changed so dramatically in a short amount of time, where I think churches were not bold and brave enough to be able to say, hey, let's think creatively. Many more are now. And that's one of the good things that come out of this. Churches and our egos, pastors and our egos, we're a lot more able to say, you know what, let's talk creatively here. So we're hopeful. Good stuff. All right, move on to the next one. All right. This is also very challenging, and I'll talk a little bit about this. So we, as a church community, we began as part of what is called the Evangelical Covenant Church. That is denomination. Actually talked about that a little bit in my sermon here earlier. There are literally thousands of denominations throughout the world. And if you grew up in the church, maybe denominations totally make sense to you. If you did not grow up in the church, this sounds like alphabet soup. Quite a bit. I grew up within the Lutheran Church, and I was initially part of the LCA that then became the ELCA, which was a combination of the ALC and the AELC as they combined together.
And then there was an LMNOP.
Right? Like it's one of those silly things that if you don't live in that world, it can be pretty wild. And it's why I talked about the football stuff earlier. At the end of the day, when we talk about the Christian church, in a lot of ways, we are all on the same team. We really are. And there are those that see different denominations and the Great Reformation that happened with Martin Luther and all that. They see that as a negative because now we've split up into different churches. And yet, I have always thought we reach more people because we have different churches. We reach different people because we have different denominations. It's great that we are. It actually becomes a real negative when we start to think that any one denomination, they've got it right and everybody else has it wrong. And let's be real, if you've grown up within the Christian church, you've probably been in one of those denominations where they said, well, we've got it right. Everybody else kind of has it wrong. We were part of the Evangelical Covenant Church. It's a really, really solid denomination. It's a little bit smaller in terms of quote-unquote American denominations. There are currently 800 to 850 churches that are part of that nationwide. Here in the Pacific Northwest, it's 60 to 70 churches that are a part of that. And so that's been our group that we have banded together with. Denominations vary in terms of how they operate as well. Some, quite honestly, are very hierarchical, very top-down. They make determinations for you as a church. They send you a pastor. You don't get any choice in that. There are those that are out there. The Evangelical Covenant Church is very much congregationally based. So the congregations make a lot of their own decisions. The congregation decides who to call as a pastor. Congregations own the property. That has been the pattern for this. So it has been a really good home for us in a lot of different ways. They do some things really, really well. Within this denomination, there's been a number of things where we don't necessarily agree with how the denomination does things, points of emphasis. That has been true for every denomination I've ever been a part of. There is no one perfect denomination, so there's always different points of tension. But you just figure those out, and you live within that tension together. Because again, overall, we're doing good work together. There's been a particular issue that for a variety of reasons, and we'll talk about this as much or as little as you guys want to, has been a point of tension for us, and it has led to us wanting to have this conversation with you all. I will say that about half of the churches that I have been at, where I've been a pastor, have lived with the tension around LGBTQ involvement within those churches. And the tension was that the pastoral leadership and the leadership team of those churches would hold what you might call a traditional view on LGBTQ issues. That they would have said everyone was welcome at that church, but they would hold that LGBTQ behavior is sinful behavior, and therefore because of that, they would not recognize marriages, they would not do marriages, people who were LGBTQ would not be involved in leadership. And again, about half those churches I was at, that was kind of the stance of the leadership. And then they would say, the tension point is if you disagree with that, then you're living with that tension. Everyone's still welcome here, and we want you here. But you need to know that your leadership kind of sits there. When we started Hope, we essentially flipped that tension point. That as your pastor, and that for the majority of the leadership team, certainly don't want to speak for all, but the majority of the leadership team held that we were going to say all are welcome here. And that we did not necessarily see homosexual behavior as sinful behavior. And therefore, we would recognize marriages, if asked, that I would do a marriage, that people who are LGBTQ would be involved in leadership. And again, we recognize that there's tension within that. We're not trying to pretend that everyone agrees with that. That's the reality, that there's still tension there. And so if you disagreed with that, you were still welcome here. That has always been true. But we just wanted to be kind of name, all right, but now you're probably the point of tension, as opposed to it being flipped the other way. Within the ECC, we've been flipped again. The ECC, on the whole, held that more traditional view from a LGBTQ standpoint. That was where they landed on that. And then those of us who wanted to have that conversation, wanted to talk about is there a different way where we could do that, we were the tension point within that. And that was where we sat for a while, and that was okay. That was a fine spot to be. For a variety of reasons, the ECC has now moved to a point from a leadership standpoint where they are respectfully and very kindly saying that they would like to not have that conversation any longer. Where it was part of the conversation before, they would just like to ask that people that sit differently on that, if they would withdraw from the Covenant Church. I can give a little bit of information about that if you'd like, but that is the end result of where that lands. And so for me individually as a pastor, I needed to make that decision. All right, what does that mean for me? My journey is certainly parallel, of course, to this church, but it's different. And so I've had a conversation with leadership. Again, they're respectfully asking that I would withdraw from being an ordained pastor within the Covenant Church. And so I will. They're not looking for a fight on that. I'm not looking for a fight on that. From a congregational standpoint, then Hope needs to have the same process and decide, do we as a church step away, officially withdraw from the ECC or not? And we need to have that because they're asking us to. This wasn't something that we were necessarily pushing for. I will share part of this is coming from there are churches and pastors who are choosing not to leave the Covenant Church. They've grown up in the covenant, they want to stay in the covenant, this is their home denomination, and they want to continue that conversation. And so it's become a pretty serious point of tension. And that's fine. That's the reality of life in the church. For me, I didn't want the fight individually, so I'm just going to withdraw. And my read is that is where the majority of Hope is at, that Hope would prefer not to have the fight either, and would prefer to withdraw. In the conversations that we've had, it has been our impression that the majority of Hope landed in this particular spot on LGBTQ issues. We could be wrong on that, but again, as your pastor and as leadership, as we talked about it, we thought, well, this is kind of where we're at. So what that would mean would be we would formally withdraw from the ECC. Can we still partner with the ECC in ways? Absolutely. That would be up to us to decide, as well as the Covenant Church, of course, in terms of where that works. One example of which would be Cascades Camp. You guys have heard me talk about that. It's one of my favorite places in the world. I asked when we were having this conversation, can I still go? And they laughed. They said, of course, yes, please. Again, we really are on the same team. But for different reasons, this is a point of tension. And they'd prefer it to not be a point of tension with us. They'd prefer for us to work side by side, but no longer in a formal relationship with each other. I'm okay with that. There are still things about the ECC that I would like to support, and I'll do that as I support other stuff. There's all kinds of different Christians out there that I disagree with on. This wasn't planned, but literally what I said today about original sin, that puts me in like a small pocket of people within the Christian. There are a lot of people that disagree with me with what I said on original sin. I don't know, I don't need everyone to agree with me in order to work together. We've got bigger stuff to do. We got to tell people about Jesus. So that's kind of where I land on that. Yes.
So would we be non-denominational, or is there another denomination that you're considering?
That is a very good question. So, and that's why, all this, kind of bleeds into each other a little bit. Individually, as a pastor, I could just get my credentials literally online in the next 5 minutes. It's wild how that has become the case. I don't think I'll do that. Individually, I prefer being part of something bigger than myself. I like the accountability. I like the camaraderie. So I will look for that. And I've had some conversations leading towards that. For those same reasons, assuming I continue as the pastor of Hope, and that's everyone's decision to make here as well, I would encourage the same thing for Hope. I like being a part of something bigger than ourselves. And I'm not under the illusion that we're going to find a perfect denomination out there. We'll find another denomination that we'll have some tension with over something. I don't know what it will be, but there will be something.
And I think this kind of goes back to what Greg was sharing is there may be churches, we don't know who they are. There's lots of them that are smaller and potentially facing a closure. And so it's an opportunity, not for us saying we're church shopping doesn't sound good. That's not how I intend it. But there may be an opportunity for a natural connection and partnership and emerge in that way. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of to say, are we going to be non-denominational or are we going to pick a certain? We don't know until we kind of look at different options kind of going forward.
Mm-hmm. I will name, just again in the spirit of honesty, I came out of the Lutheran tradition. Part of the reason why I fit within the ECC is that the ECC was a break from the Lutheran Church as well. It was part of the Swedish Lutheran Church. So from a theology standpoint, there was always a natural partnership there. When I left the Lutheran Church, it wasn't because I was angry and mad, it's because I had this opportunity. So it's an easy conversation for me to consider that. And from a theology standpoint, I think many here at Hope would find some cross conversation there within the Lutheran Church to be pretty natural. So that's a natural one that I for sure will take, and I think Hope may consider that. But that's not saying that's for sure what is going to happen. Yes?
There's a question online.
Excellent.
Just to clarify what LGBTQ is for those that may not be aware.
Perfect, yes. So if you're unfamiliar with LGBTQ, that is the initials for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transsexual, and queer, and then often there's a plus within that as well as that community continues to grow and expand. So this is dealing, again, rather specifically with our lesbian, gay, bisexual, transsexual brothers and sisters. It is a population that has, again, just to be blunt, has generally not been welcomed within the church. And for reasons that bring me joy, that seems to be a population that I connect well with. I love it. I love having conversations with folks within this community. We've done that both personally. I do that in particular through a lot of the theater work that I do. I can't tell you how much joy it brings me when 14-year-old kids who absolutely believe that a church would never welcome them figure out that their director is also a white male pastor. They figured out the white male part, but it's the pastor part. They're like, what? But you like me? Yeah, I do. That's just been a community that we have been able to reach. And I individually am happy I can do that.
Can I push you on that just a little bit?
Yeah, for sure.
And just explain why there's a difference between where we're at with Hope and other churches that say that they believe in LGBTQ and they are open about it, and they also believe that that is fine, but there's still a difference about where we want to go.
Yeah.
Right? Can you know?
Meaning like those that say, hey, everyone's welcome.
Yeah, everybody's welcome. Every church says that, and I
Yes.
think that it's very important that we distinguish that that's not what we're saying here, that there's more to it.
It is, yeah. Good question. And actually, yeah, that'll give me a chance to circle back to something else as well. Yes, I do think every church says everyone's welcome, and I think for many of them they believe that. Particularly around this, I've been able to ask some people really close to me. If I say everyone's welcome, but you couldn't get married in my church, and if I say everyone's welcome, but I could not do your marriage, and if I say everyone's welcome, but you could not serve in leadership at my church, do you in fact feel welcome? And they're able to respond to me, no. To say everyone's welcome sounds great, and then there comes a point where you bump into that. And some churches do that incredibly well, and they're reaching great people. They really are. But for us, speak for myself, for me, I've had the chance to speak directly to people and say, are you really welcome? And they've been able to tell me no. And at the end of the day, then I'm going to choose for them to feel welcome. Not to feel welcome, to be welcome fully and completely. In terms of then, yeah, what does that mean? And I hope this comes out really well. There are churches that do that really well also, and then try to share that in a way. So you'll see pride flags during June or on websites and things like that. I would say that would not be my choice, that we would not put a pride flag necessarily on our website or do specific things for that. Because, as we've tried to talk about, we don't want that to be our defining issue. Our defining issue here is Jesus. Mm-hmm. It's in fact actually why we think that it leads us to this stance that everyone is welcome, because we believe Jesus would say that everyone's welcome just as they are. And once you start doing that, then yeah, you're starting to say, okay, well, this is the most important thing about us. Well, no, the most important thing about us is Jesus. That's going to be it. But if anybody asks on this, we want to be really clear. No, hey, yeah, when we say everyone's welcome, we really mean it, and we mean it in this way. Does that answer that? Yeah, cool. Yes, a couple of questions, yeah.
Okay, I'm crying. Yeah. I have a lot more history than most of you do, probably, in the covenant. And it wasn't I'm first generation, like my family, when I was about 8, we started going to the Lake Stevens Covenant Church, South Lake Stevens Covenant Church, actually Hillcrest Covenant at that point. I just want to bring that in, just because a lot of you might not feel that.
Yeah.
And so then our church closed. We looked around Lake Stevens. We couldn't find a church that was a good fit. So it's like, oh, I guess the covenant still. And we came to Everett, And so it's just, I am sad by the covenant stand. But it also hurts me to think about leaving. So I just want to say that. And maybe we can have more discussion about, you and I can have discussion about what the covenant is saying and doing. So, but I do have a question. In general, history with churches and assets, denominations often don't want their assets to leave. And so I'm guessing, since you've had some conversations, that they're okay with assets leaving? I don't know.
Yes, to both those things that you said. The reality, there are those for whom leaving churches and leaving denominations is easy. And there are those for whom it's really hard. And it serves us well to remember those for whom it's hard. That those are deep relationships. And we should focus on that. With the covenant in particular, again, I want to continue to try and say things as kindly as we possibly can. So the short answer is yes. How we operate as a church and how the covenant has generally operated as a church is your assets are your own. And if you choose to leave, you can leave with those assets. That has always been their polity. And so they've been supportive of that for their entire existence. And now, especially in this time, because there are some churches that are fighting to stay, and it is becoming a church fight, just to name it. And it is, they're both pastors and churches that are creating some real big points of tension. The way that the covenant talked to me, again, just spirit of honesty, they said they would love to bless us as we leave. They do want us to leave. That is their request. Wasn't coming from us. That was their request. But as part of that, they named specifically, we aren't looking for a fight. We don't want to keep the building. We don't want to. That's exactly it. We don't want another fight because they've got several going on, and that's not where they want to be. So that's why, rather specifically, they are talking about this with us.
I gotta stand up.
Yes.
I can identify a lot what Sally said, because it's break my heart. Yeah. And my daughter, now 54, will be 54. We came here when she was 10. That is over 40 years ago. Before that, we was in Aberdeen Covenant Church, and by the way, they closed some years ago. Yeah. But we was there 5 years. So I probably have been close to 50 years in a covenant. Now, I grew up in Denmark, and I went to Norway. That was similar to the covenant church. So I understand completely now you talk about the church. We can't afford to be here because many things are going wrong. So I was counting in my head. I had done quite a bit. We maybe are 10, 15 people. Some are the covenant from beginning. And we don't have the money to rebuild and all that stuff. So here I have a question. It's not the same like you have, but it's a question I have prayed about and talked to God about. What I can understand, you would leave to say it right out. Are there in the conference some pastors, some know about the situation, and we can keep the church, and they will send us a new pastor with a lot of money? We still can be here, but we can begin looking for a covenant pastor.
Yeah.
It's
a lovely question, Ellen. And I guess I don't necessarily want to speak for the covenant on the whole, but again, in the spirit of honesty, no, there's not a lot of pastors, and there's not a lot of money, and there's a number of covenant churches in our area that are all going to close, and they're going to close soon. It's a hard time. It's a hard time to be the church in general, and it's a hard time to be a church in the Northwest. So that is part of the reason why they actually would prefer to bless us, because the covenant wants to see churches continue. They really do. And they see exactly what we see, that if we relaunch in a new space, that we will reach new people. And they're very excited about that. So that would be their preference, to see that happen in new space, and even if it's not officially covenant. You individually, as a person, you can continue to be part of the covenant church, even if you attend a different denomination, and I think they'd be open to that. You can find ways to continue to financially support the covenant, and they need that right now. Those are all cool possibilities. But in terms of, someone else coming in here and trying to revitalize this, I don't see it.
And I think that's part of the reason why, as we kind of got information back from the small groups around what needs to happen next with the building, can we refurbish, can we do all the different things, we felt it really important as a leadership team to come out in front of the congregation and say, here's everything that is happening, so that individuals can make a decision based on their individual needs and feelings. We didn't want there to be any, there's secrets or those kinds of things, so that's why we're here. And it also gives you an opportunity to kind of take this in and say, what is next for me and my family? Am I ready to move? Am I okay with leaving ECC? And that's all going to be an individual decision, and that's okay. And I think it's okay, I know it's okay, to mourn and to feel that sadness too.
Yes.
I keep hearing a lot around, my community, people leaving the church because of the arguments and fights, and also the way that the loud church is politically.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, I don't know, it also makes me sad to leave. I understand they're done fighting, they're tired of fighting, I get that. I'm just wondering if there's any way to stay and have a conversation, continuing the conversation, because this takes, especially when you've grown up really believing one thing, takes time to change. And I wonder if there's leadership at all in the Everett Covenant, in the Covenant Church that are open to continuing to think about it and let it just sit, or if they're like, nope, it's either a fight or you have to go. Because I just am so sad that everyone's just like, well, then I'm done, and then we leave the church to be this hateful. Not that everyone who believes that LGBTQ is sinful are hateful people. I don't mean that, but the loudness is so hurtful, and I just don't want the church to become that. So I guess I just wonder if how we can, and maybe what you're saying, to go alongside, to not be officially part of it, but to go alongside and partner in some ways is the best way to do that.
Yeah, appreciate the question. The reason why we're still in the covenant, because we've been in the tension point the entire time, is because they've got to the point of saying we'd like you to withdraw. So I'm trying to honor that. So yeah, could we stay? And are there people that are staying in order to continue the conversation? Yes, there are. We could choose to do that. But let's name it then for what it would be. We'd be picking a fight. That's it. Will the covenant need to have this conversation? I think they will, with or without us. And maybe if we continue to have not primary relationship, but secondary relationship with covenant in some ways, then we'll be able to be aware of that and maybe partner in other ways in the future. But for where we are right now, and with everything else kind of going on, that is part of what Mikey was talking about. We've got all this stuff that's parallel tracking, and at some point, in order to move ahead on any of it, we've got to move ahead on all of it. So now's a time where we've got to make this decision. Well, I guess we don't have to, but we thought, yeah.
They will make it
Yeah.
for us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've talked to Bill about this because I come from a church that went to LGBTQ, and we had married couples in our church. We had young people that came up with my children, which was 50 years ago, and they were gay. Nobody ever shunned them or anything. Okay, so the church, the Methodist church, all of a sudden went to every Methodist church went to inviting LGBTQ, whatever. And we were always a welcoming church, and literally we did. We hung the P flag out every Sunday. We had it out almost all week long. Do you know that the LGBTQ all left the church, and the Methodist churches are closing? The one in North Everett closed, the one on the middle of Everett closed, the one in South Everett is closing. The huge one in Minneapolis that was over 3,000 people is down to like 500. So, when you go to say because you're leaving because of the LG, that's not what's causing it.
Yes, I appreciate you sharing that, Arvidel. That's a challenging thing. There are all the American churches right now are trying to figure out their way kind of within all this. And this is one particular issue of many. And that's actually kind of part of the point. We're actually trying not to make it our predominant issue. We really do want to be clear on that. Having said that, yes, because of just where we land, because of our understanding of Jesus, that puts us, within a tension point within our denomination. We're not necessarily choosing to leave over it, but we are being told that we need to leave over it. Might that challenge our attendance? I don't know. What's the causality doesn't necessarily equal reality or whatever that might be. Who knows about that? And there are a lot of churches that are struggling. Some of which many people would claim it's because they embraced this or because they did that or whatever. I guess at the end of the day, we're just going to have to try and be true to what we think Jesus is calling us to.
Well, I talked to one of the kids that my girls grew up with, and I said, why did you leave the church when we opened up the church to you? He said, because you made it special. He said, you pointed me out now.
Right.
He said, you pointed a finger at me, and he said, I did not like that.
Yeah, right. That's good to hear. And that would hopefully not be what we're doing here. Yeah. Good questions. Yeah, here in the front.
Not a question so much as a comment. I think all the denominations have their isms and schisms. They want to fall on their sword on. The Baptists, of course, want water immersion baptism, and if you don't do that, then you're not a Baptist. And then there's the King James only churches that if you don't just worship with the King James Bible, then you're reading a heretical Bible. And then there's other ones that you got to meet on Saturdays instead of Sundays, and they have that. And my comment is, after all these years of being a born-again Christian, honest to Pete, saved in a Baptist church, right? Honest to Pete, I'll just say it this way: the farther you fall away from grace, the worse it becomes, because I listen to these smart people. I mean, the first challenging person that I started listening to was R.C. Sproul, who had a different view of end times than I did. And I said, well, this guy's a smart guy, and he's like obviously a Christian. What's going on here? And then I listened, and then I read the book, What's So Amazing About Grace by Philip Yancey, who some evangelicals embrace and some of them hate him. And the whole point of it is none of us have it right. And when we fall on our swords about one thing or another, I think it's a mistake. We just gotta, and I appreciate the view of this church, keep our eyes on Jesus. That's the right thing.
Thank you. Good. That it for now? All right. We're going to move on to this next section. And we do have another group coming in here pretty soon, but we want to give as much time to this. So we just got some specific things that we're going to request you all start praying over and as we take these next steps and try and figure out where that leads us. So, yeah. Can you?
I have to read my notes.
Sorry.
I'm not an expert in all of this, and so I'm just like, I'm going to read my notes. So I think that as we kind of go forward, there's a lot of different things that as a congregation we can do. And just with regards to prayer. And I love that Ellen said, I've been praying on this for a long time and I have a question. That's exactly what we're called to do by Jesus, is to really, if we are grappling with something and we are struggling with something, or when we're having great moments of joy, is to be able to pray and ask those questions or celebrate with our God, because that's the purpose. So as we're kind of going forward, we just want to encourage you that as we are praying as a congregation, that we're not only praying for each other and what our next steps might be, but for the Everett community that we've been a part of for so many years. And what does that mean as far as we've got a lot of different groups outside of Hope that meet here currently, right, that use this facility for things that are not necessarily a different church. And so just being able to pray for our community as a larger whole. We know our transient population has become a little bit more challenging, and it's come with different kind of safety concerns than we necessarily saw pre-pandemic with folks that are experiencing homelessness. And so I think being able to pray for those individuals, because they are struggling and sometimes they don't know how to access help. Sometimes they are not interested in accessing help. And I just think that as a group, we want to come together and just be able to celebrate the things that we have done and pray for those that continue to be in need, and for each other. I also think that I love that Ellen just kind of led into praying for discernment. Like, she's been asking and praying and asking questions and waiting for God to clarify for her. So that is really important as we go forward as a church, to continue to do that as well in partnership. And then thinking about your, like, pray for me. No, I'm kidding. I don't mean to make light, but the conversations that we've been having in leadership are hard conversations to have. It's not like we just said, okay, well, we met for, overnight and we just decided and we made this big sweeping decision for our congregation. We've had a lot of dialogue, and it's been over a year long, around what our next steps for Hope. Where do we stand? Where do we see ourselves? And we've done, as a leadership team, taken a look at how we operate. And we have continued to go back as a team to Jesus being at our core, right? We strongly believe we are Jesus-centered, and that's where are we going to, as a leadership, have the strongest impact, not only with and for our congregation, but for our community at large. All right?
Good. Perfect. What's next? Just questions. All right. Questions, and I have kind of one last thing I was going to share at the end. But any other questions you might have at this time? Yeah, right up here. Well, sorry.
Timeline-wise, are you looking at something like maybe a couple of years before we would leave this building?
That is a great question. That leads into the last thing I wanted to say. All right. It's like I paid you $5 ahead of time to do that. The timeline on this is very unsure and uncertain. I want to be clear on that. Having said that, I will. This is just me, so let me own this. Sorry, Tim.
Scoot to the right.
That was weird.
Excuse.
I joke a lot about how we move at the speed of church, and that means slow. We move really slow typically around here. I don't know that we can do that right now. I'll just be blunt. When I talk about churches closing and things changing, like, they're closing now. They're changing now. We've been saying the next big time where all this is going to happen is right now, this fall, because every church that has been struggling over the last year has thought, all right, well, fall is going to come and people are going to come back. They're not coming back. They're not coming back. Who you have is who you've got. We have a core. We have an opportunity to do something. But if we don't do it now, we're going to miss our window. So, all kidding aside, yeah, this could take a couple of years. Honestly, if it takes a couple of years, I don't think we'll be here. I think if this takes a couple of years, I think we'll be gone by then. And I could be wrong on that, but I'm trying to be in front of all this. I'm trying to talk to a lot more pastors and a lot more denominational leaders than I normally would, and every conversation I have leads to the same thing. Everybody's seeing the same thing, that this is different than what we were experiencing before. And if you're not being proactive right now, you're not going to have a chance to be reactive. You're just going to be gone. It could be before Christmas. And I say that not joking. That would be wild. No church in the history of churches has ever moved that quickly, right? We don't do that ever. And yet, if we don't do that now, what are we doing? I mean, really, I keep talking to pastors whose churches are closing today. You know, they're done. These ministries aren't making it. And we have an opportunity to be one of those proactive churches that says, hey, we can do things differently. Let's get to it. There are people to reach. There's literally millions of people who aren't going to church. There's millions of people who don't know Jesus. That's not the problem. The problem is us. The problem is, are we going to be bold enough in order to actually be the church that is needed right now? And that might look different, and how that gets funded might be different, and all those things about that might be different. But if we spend the next 2 to 3 years talking about it, I don't think we'll be here. I really don't. So I did want to end with that because I wanted to say that. I mean, if we come back here in 6 weeks and say, hey, we have an opportunity, what do you guys think? I didn't want that to be the first time you guys all heard about it. I don't have an opportunity, but I am. Like, the reason I'm telling you all this, like, I'm having these conversations. I am talking to denominational leaders. I am talking to other pastors. I'm doing this way more in the last several months than I was doing before. I do hope I have something for you in 6 weeks. I do. Because I still think there's a reason for hope in our community. Okay. All right. There are people who don't know Jesus, and we're equipped to reach them. And if we waste our time talking about the best way to do that for the next 2 or 3 years, that's not how I want to end my career.
It's a missed opportunity.
Yeah. I want to reach people for Jesus. We've spent a lot of time praying about this. We know what he's calling us to. We just got to be brave enough to do it. All right. Any other questions? Sorry. Well, what's that? You want to close in prayer? That'd be great.
Dear Heavenly Father, I just thank you for this opportunity to get in front of our congregation, our friends, and really our extended family, and to be able to share what leadership team has been grappling with over the last year, and just ask that as our partners are given the opportunity to just dig into, think about, reflect on the information they received today, bless them with knowledge, help them to feel empowered to ask questions if they still have them. I ask that you continue to watch over us as a congregation and as your people and your followers. Please watch over us, keep us healthy and safe going forward into this next week. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Yeah, please, if you have questions, please feel free to email me, set up a time to talk about it, go over coffee. Mikey as well, anybody on the leadership team, finance team, we'd love to talk with you about this. We'd rather talk about this way more than, feel like you guys didn't get a chance to get heard. Those of you online, same goes for you as well. Thank you so much. We need to pack up pretty quickly, so if any of y'all can help with any of that stuff, that'd be great. And away we'll go. Thank you.